All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here are doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Colorado Buffaloes. Deion Sanders enters his third year as head coach. 13-12 mark this far. Third year on the role for Pat Shurmur. Third year on the staff. That is second in the role of offensive coordinator. Robert Livingstone, second year in a role as defensive coordinator. Pretty good offseason. Top 25 hauls in the high school and portal ranks, and they had a pretty successful 2024 campaign going 9-4. And of course, Travis Hunter won the Heisman Trophy before they ultimately lost in the Alamo Bowl to cap off the season. Getting started with the Colorado offense, Nick, and this is a group that only returns two starters. They heavily go to the portal once again, so I think the numbers you see here, it's not going to be expected that they're going to replicate that this upcoming year because I think they're going to look to have more balance. I think they're not going to be as pass heavy, but that certainly comes down to a lot of factors. And I want to start with the offensive line that has been a weakness for them, but I think it can eventually mold into a strength potentially. Jordan Seaton in left tackle, I think he's going to emerge as one of the best players in college football, his respective positions. He's really been solid in his first two seasons. I consider him one of the top tackles in the country. The rest of the group's made up of transfers, though. Xylon Chrysler, a three-year starter at right guard for Illinois, was pretty poor, but had crucial experience. Added a pretty good player at center in Zari McGill, who's been a strong pass blocker at 6'2", 320. Akai Gunbai comes over from Texas A&M. He saw 300-plus snaps back in 21 and 22. Not much action since then, though, for the Aggies. Love the addition of Xavier Hill. He had an elite season for Memphis last year. First half of the season, he was at the guard position. That he played right tackle the second half of the season. So he has a lot of versatility there for them. 450-plus snaps at both positions. I think Xavier Hill is going to be a tremendous addition. Tyler Brown, he was the starting left guard last season. Then they have Phillip Houston. He was a solid run blocker at right tackle. I think overall this offensive line has some nice depth due to some returning starters matched with the portal adds. I think this offensive line will be better, but we need to start finding pop in the run game. Pass protections from the tackles I think will be stout, Nick. And we usually don't start with the offensive line, but I think with this group, losing Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, they're going to be a significant focal point for them to run a really good offense that has nice balance and can really compete. So that's why I wanted to focus on here first. And what are your thoughts on what they've accomplished?
Yeah, you make a good point. We normally don't start with the O-line. It's typically the last unit we talk about when talking about the offense. Most teams, you want to talk about the quarterback, you want to talk about the wide receivers maybe, or even the running back room. But I think the O-line is appropriate to start with at Colorado because it has been a problem unit for them the past couple of seasons. I don't entirely blame the O-line for the 134th ranking of 65 yards per game on the ground, but it certainly plays a big part in it. Jordan Seaton really progressed as a pass blocker and a run blocker. He was a highly rated recruit out of the Washington, D.C. area for a reason. This is a kid that was so highly sought after, a five-star that they really went out and grabbed, a big grab in the high school class, which, some of the high school classes have not been as strong as people hoped they would be at Colorado, but that was a big grab there, and Seaton really played up to his billing early on. I think he's going to continue to do so. They went out and attacked the portal here on the O-line. They didn't use the portal a lot this year compared to previous years, but they went out and added key pieces on the O-line, which I think was a really positive thing for Deion and company. I'll start with McGill, who comes over from Louisiana Tech. I thought he was solid there. Also was at ULM in the past. He's a solid player at 6'2", 320. You can certainly use him. I think he'll be really good for this team. Xavier Hill was a phenomenal add from Memphis. He has some SEC experience as well from LSU. 6'4", 318. He's a big body. They're going to move him around, probably play him at left guard. I think he'll be really good there. I like what they added in Chrysler as well from Illinois. He was a pretty solid JUCO player before going to Illinois, 6'7", 340, so he's a big body there. He'll certainly be good on the interior. They'll move him as well. And then Tiamani as well, coming over from Ole Miss, was not a bad add either. He's bounced around a couple different programs. I like what they have here. They've added some solid pieces. I think Seaton will continue to take that huge step forward. I think Phillip Houston, that is, could fight for that right tackle position as well if he's going to win that starting battle. Overall, then this O-line is certainly going to be stronger than it was last year, but it's still not a super strong unit in this conference. They need to continue adding and working on that. I'm glad Deion's addressing that because it was a big key issue last year, and it may continue to haunt them a little bit here.
Let's go ahead and go back to the top of this offense. The headline, of course, is what they did at quarterback. No program probably did better in securing two quarterbacks to replace their high-level starter as they pick up Caden Salter and Julian Lewis. Salter comes over from Liberty, a guy who showcases good arm strength, can drive the ball downfield, has shown mechanics and ability to layer the ball. Good playmaker, especially as a runner. The size of 6'1", 190 isn't ideal. He did struggle to produce as a passer this past season. Processing can be iffy with him from a mental standpoint. He can sometimes get lazy and throw late balls as well. Inconsistent placement and vision. His ability to run the ball, though, could be a big beneficiary for this offense with designed QB runs. What do you do when you have a poor offensive line, Nick? Keep the defense off balance. And Shedeur, as good as he is, that's just not something that was in his game. They couldn't call that one bit. So Pat Shermer now has this dynamic into his offense that I think can certainly allow all these groups to flourish now, that they can call design QB runs of a guy that's going to be able to run the ball with precision and pick up good ground game. So I think that Salter coming over here, Nick, is a perfect fit for what they need.
I think Salter would be a really solid fit. You can question his drop production from 2023 to 2024. In 2023, he had a phenomenal season at Liberty, right? 2,800 yards rushing, 32 touchdowns to 6 picks, 12 rushing touchdowns. Just a phenomenal season overall, right? 44 combined touchdowns, a really impressive number on a Liberty team that ended up going and playing in a key bowl game. It was really solid in 2023. They played a New Year's Six bowl prior to playoff expansion. Disappointing year at Liberty overall last year. I think some of that does rely on Salter, but also some of that falls on the team. He had 1,800 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 6 picks, 579 and 7 rushing touchdowns in 2024. Which Keaton Salter are they going to get in Colorado? Are they going to get the 2023 version, the 2024 version? I think it's a big question to ask. This guy's a big physical specimen, though. He's really solid on the ground, very mobile, can really get out of the pocket, as his rushing stats show. Really fun to play with in the cultural video game, which comes out shortly at the time of recording this episode. So he's a fun player overall. I think he'll do really solid at Colorado. This was a really good portal ad. This is a guy that they could really work with. And like you said, a bad offensive line will lead to improvisation there. And he'll be able to improvise and really kind of figure out and do some fun things and make things happen that other quarterbacks wouldn't. But Lewis behind him obviously is the highly rated 5-star freshman coming out of Georgia, who's a highly tapped player that will certainly get the keys at some point. I think you start with Salter. Certainly they went and got him the portal for a reason. Salter will be a steady hand to lead this team early on.
Julian Lewis, like you mentioned, 5-star recruit, ended up decommitting from USC late in the cycle. But if Lincoln Riley was in on you for all those years, you're clearly a great talent. A guy who's also 6'1", 190, has a quick release, has really impressive mechanics, good precision thrower at the second level. Pretty savvy player if his accuracy does need to keep fine-tuning his vertical passing skills. And, of course, being a smaller statured player is a bit of a negative there. But I think they got things figured out here, especially if Deion's in this for the long haul. Salter will be a good bridge for Lewis going into the future. He can be a 3 or 4 year starter. And if Deion does end up leaving, I think Lewis would follow with him. So I think the quarterback position will be just fine. You look at the running back room. Michael Welch, Dalton Hayden both returned. They less than 200 yards each last year. Charlie Orfidal was right behind them in rushing, had only had 26 carries all year. Isaiah Augusta, if he ends up departing, that's pretty much the exact same room from last year. I think Hayden's a skilled player. They did pick up DeKalon Taylor from Incarnate Word, about a 168-pounder who had 925 rushing yards last year. It doesn't matter who's in this backfield, Nick. If they can't do better up front, they're not going to produce. The production has just been lousy from them. I mean, they do nothing on the ground one bit, 2.5 yards per attempt last season. They had like 2 games last year where they did a little bit on the ground. I remember against UCF, then against Arizona, they showed a bit of a pulse. They still didn't top 150 yards once last year, and that's something they've only did once in Deion Sanders' tenure, Nick. We got to do something on the ground.
I mean, 65 yards per game on the ground, it's just unacceptable, right? If you're going to be a high-level program competing for college football playoff appearances, for Big 12 titles, you cannot be having 65 yards per game on the ground. It's just an embarrassingly not bad number. Dead last in college football. Just a bad number across the board here. They're going to run it back here. Taylor, I think, was a good add from UIW. I think he's a good player that could certainly develop in this system. You look at the guys they have, like you said, all 3 of the backs, Hayden, Welch, and Arfidal, had below 200 yards rushing. Hayden had 196, 3.1 in a score. Well, I thought Michael Welch looked the best out of the bunch, 186, 4.3 in a score for him. Curious to see how he develops here. I think Welch could certainly take that next step and be the top back for this team. He was good in the 9 games he played. Curious to see what he looks like this year, though. I'm keeping an eye on him.
I move to the receiving group here that's obviously going to undergo a lot of turnover. The headliner Hunter's gone, Wesker, Shepard, Jimmy Horn. The top 4 guys are all gone, and these were all really good ball players. All these guys ended up in the NFL, so I think those guys are going to have long careers. But now we have to replace them, right? So we ended up getting some nice ads late in the portal. Hakeem Williams, an ex-5-star from Florida State. Didn't do anything for them, though. Sincere Brown from Campbell, 1,000 yards at the FCS level in 2024. They do return Draylon Miller and Amarian Miller. No relation between the two. Draylon, though, had some big plays late in the season. Amarian had 2 great games before getting hurt and ended up missing the rest of the 24 season. Travis Hunter, of course, missed most of the Kansas State game, and he stepped up. 8 grabs for 145 yards. So I think the 2 Millers are going to be guys they can lean on, and I think they'll be impressive. Isaiah Hardage arrived as a corner. Looks like he'll be moving to receiver full-time. Terrell Timmons, limited production in his career. Among the new guys, you have a 4-star freshman, Quanell Fakarin, and a really good transfer from Tulane in Joseph Williams, who had 3 straight 100-yard games in November. Solid group. I like the starting trio. After that, they kind of lacked any type of proven contributors, though. But I think the two late additions, Nick gave them some much needed depth to another transfer heavier room. But Miller, the two of them, that is, I think are going to be main staples in this offense. I think they'll do pretty well.
Yeah, I like the two Millers a lot here. I think Daylon Miller is a really solid player, 277, 8.7, and 3 scores for him. While Marion Miller was good for this team, 216, 21.6 yards per grab, and 1 touchdown for him before his injury. He's a great player. I'm excited to see what he looks like this year. I think he can take that big step forward there. He'll be really solid for them. At that wide receiver X position, he'll get a lot of targets. You look at the guys they added. Sincere Brown was really good at Campbell when he played there. I think over 1,000 yards is a pretty impressive number there. I think he could be really solid for this team. I look at Joseph Williams coming over from Tulsa, 588, 5 scores, 19.6 for him. He was not bad for Tulsa last year. Key Williams is a highly ranked recruit out of high school, just did not work at Florida State. 187 and a touchdown for him on 16 grabs. So that's it's a gamble there. They're bringing in an ex-5-star in Hakeem Williams, who could certainly show that full potential maybe out here in a new system. Curious to see how this room develops. Obviously, losing Hunter, who got drafted by the Jaguars and should have a phenomenal career there, will be tough to replace that sort of production. It's going to be tough, and you have to see with a new quarterback what it's going to look like here. But this offense is taking a step back. There's no shame in admitting that. But I think the wide receiving group they have here is not bad.
Looking at the offensive verdict, and I think the biggest question is, can they run a normal offense now? They ran lots of just pure go routes. The downfield pass game had a heavy presence, a lot of playmaking from the quarterback and wide receiver group, where the offensive line and the run game were pretty much non-existent at times. I think it's really hard to accurately gauge this offense, Nick. It just truly is. And it's going to come down to how the O-line performs. That's why we started with them. And if the run game can find some spark, I don't think it'll be, to a large degree, but the add of Salters in his legs gives them a badly needed element. The wide receiver group has some solid players, but can they be top-tier producers in this conference? Maybe this offense will be probably average at best with the loss of Shadur and Hunter. Those are monumental, Nick. Those guys flat out carried the program. Now you don't have that. It's going to be much harder. So I'm going to go with a B-. It's really hard to gauge it here. What's the ceiling? I think it's pretty high if they can really all click and, all go categories. I'm really just not sure, though, based on what we've seen over the last couple years and everything they did this offseason. It's very tough to assume.
So far, this was the toughest offense for me to grade while doing our off-season previews, because you just don't know what the lack of production is going to look like. Losing Sanders and Hunter, but also losing Wester and Will Shepherd, and bringing in a bunch of different guys here, you really got to question what this is going to look like. I think this is a very tough thing to overcome. I do trust the coaching. I think, Pat is a really solid offensive mind. Didn't really work on the NFL, but I think Pat Shermer is a great offensive mind. I think Dion does some solid work on the offense as well. Salter, if he plays to the level he played in 2023, this offense could be really solid. If Seaton continues to take that next step and the rest of the offensive line kind of develops around him, particularly, Tyler Brown and the other guards, while I think Xavier Hill has a solid season, can they find a pulse on the ground? If they can get, up to 90 rush yards per game, maybe 80 rush yards per game, that'd be a huge improvement, potentially pushing them in the right direction here. This is not going to be the same flashy offense, obviously losing the two headliners. How far of a drop, though, is coming? It's curious to see what happens. I'm definitely keeping an eye on this. I think I'm closer to probably, a C+, maybe a B- is fair. But this is just such a weird offense to grade. It's really hard to kind of understand what it's going to look like this year, and hard to gauge, certainly.
Now we move to the defensive side of the ball. In Deion's first year, they lost games because this group just got absolutely torched in all regards. And last year, they showed pretty good cohesiveness as they weren't getting gashed up nearly as much. I know late in the year they had a couple games that were strugglesome for them, but for the most part, this was a group that showed up on a week-to-week basis. Big reason for that was a defensive line that was deep. It was a collectively strong effort. Arden Walker returns after being a great rotational help with his pass rush efficiency. He was solid versus the run as well. I think he'll do well in an elevated role alongside Samuel Okunlola, who was productive and was a really good pass rusher for them. I think they have a nice tandem there. Keaton Wade was a complete tear over the last 6 games of the year. In under 5 snaps, he was phenomenal versus the run. He had 7.5 TFL, 20 tackles as well. If he can bring that type of effort on a weekly basis in 2025, he's probably going to win some hardware, quite frankly. Quincy Wiggins didn't see many snaps to round out the 2 deep, though. The best defensive recruit they got was London Merritt. He's going to be looking to crack the rotation, so they have plenty of guys here. Now you shift to the interior defensive line. Transfer heavy, Jaheim Otis has lost some weight. He's now at a good 6'5", 325. He's not really elevated his game, though, much. He's only good for about 20 snaps a game as well. When he's on field, though, for Alabama, he proved to be a pretty good gap clogger. 300-pounder Tavion Coleman from Texas State in nearly 400 snaps was a really good defender for them against the run. Gavrilo Lightfoot, 6'3", 310 is some nice size from Fresno, but he was pretty horrid in his 3 years. Did see 1,100 snaps of action, though. Return Amari McNeil, who at times was good versus the run, overall lacked consistency. Tawfiq Thomas was solid in nearly 300 snaps. So I think CU has a nice surplus of bodies here, Nick. They have a group they'll be good versus the run. I think they have good pass rush upside as well. The improvement we saw from this part of the defense was a big reason why they were so good last year. They do lose a guy like B.J. Green, which is pretty big. They're going to be just fine, though, even though Chidozie Nwankwo is also a significant loss, as he was a great run defender in his career, especially last year for the Buffs. I think they're going to be just fine, though, Nick. Again, a large surplus of bodies with size and some talent.
Yeah, I really like what they have in this defensive line. I think this is probably the best unit on this team. I like what they have here. I think Arden Walker's a phenomenal player. 33 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. He'll be solid for this team. Okulano was good for the team as well. 30 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Amari McNeil, 25 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Pretty good numbers there. Tawfiq Thomas as well, 20 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and a pass breakup for him. I mean, these are good numbers, right? This is a productive unit that they return here. And then where they needed some depth at nose tackle, they went and got Jaheim Otis, who comes from Alabama. Otis, certainly working on his size a little bit. He was good in 2023, 26 total tackles, 2 QB hurries. He only played 1 game last year for Alabama before entering the portal here. Otis, though, he's a guy that was a high-level recruit, previously under Nick Saban, so clearly a guy they have a lot of faith in. And then Lightfoot from Fresno State, I think he could be an underrated player. He wasn't great for them. Had 20 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 3 QB hurries in 2024. Had 37 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss in 2024. He's a really solid run defender. I like those 2 ads there. I think Coleman's not a terrible ad either out of the portal coming over from Texas State. He had some solid production, 26 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 4 QB hurries, 2.5 sacks in 2024. I like this unit, a surplus of solid players. Overall, I'm really happy with this defensive line. Probably the best part of this defense.
They moved to the middle of the defense. They also improved tremendously last year at the linebacking spot, where in the first year they just were out of position on every single play. And it's disappointing to see Nakia Hill-Green transfer out, but I think he's going to be great for Alabama, so a good addition for them. But I certainly would have liked him to stay, as he was going to be an alpha on this defense. But they went to the portal nonetheless and picked up some guys. Reginald Hughes from Jack State. He was a good producer. 82 tackles, 9.5 TFL, 4.5 sacks. Martavius French was really good for UTSA. He was a machine of his own. 17 tackles for loss and 80 tackles. So they added 2 veterans who got plenty of snaps to their name. They also have proven production. Jalen Wester played sparingly last fall. Jeremiah Brown, he saw plenty of reps for Jacksonville State Jackson State, that is, back in 2022. Has barely played, though, after following Dion here to Boulder. He's available in the rotation, though. They also picked up Kylan Salter, the brother, of course, the new quarterback. No snaps yet, as he's just a young player. I think it's a nice group here. It took last year's backers 2 years to get in sync, so hopefully the learning curve is not as tough for these new imports, and I don't think it will be, as they're proven veterans, Nick. I like what they did here with the addition of Hughes and French.
I like what they did here. I will say Keaton Wade is a versatile player that could play on the defensive line, could also play linebacker. I forgot to mention him earlier. 20 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. He's versatile. You may move Wade around. Probably going to put him in pass rush position, but he may play in the linebacking role this year. Hughes, I think, was a really solid ad. This is a guy that's been around some solid programs. He was previously at Ole Miss. 82 total tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 6 QB hurries. Pretty good numbers for him last year. I think French was a really solid ad. This is a guy that I think you could really get a lot out of coming over from UTSA. 80 total tackles, 17 tackles for loss last year. A really impressive number for him. I think he'll be really good for this team. I like that 1-2 punch there. I think Jeremiah Brown could be solid for this team when he gets on the field as well. I like what they have. This is a good linebacking core.
They also picked up Sean Myers from Northern Alabama late in the cycle, who was an average player for them in a couple of seasons. Now we move to the secondary. DJ McKinney returns to his post as a starting corner. Played 700-plus snaps last year. This guy is really good. Always has been one of the top corners in the country. Colton Hunt unexpectedly transferred out late here in the cycle, leaving a void. Ivan Yates only played a few snaps last year. Makari Vickers arrives from Oklahoma after barely seeing the field in 2 years. Braden Keith and R.J. Johnson both barely played last season, but they're going to compete for a starting nod. So the cornerback position outside of McKinney is not ideal, and him and Hunter never came off the field, so it never really opened up the door for anybody else to get on field and collect some snaps, Nick. So kind of a negative there, but they did have a phenomenal duo last season. And then you look at Preston Hodge. This guy was the starting slot. He didn't play anywhere near to the same level he did at Liberty 2 years ago. He was a very poor tackler, was lackluster in coverage, did nothing in the run defense. So you're hoping in his second year he can really mold into shape for this defense. The safety group returns Carter Stoutmeyer, who was a quality player, pretty impressive, I thought, especially in coverage. Tawfiq Bayard from USF. Really love this addition here. This guy excelled as a run defender, was making plays in the backfield frequently, spends a lot of time in the box, so I think Bayard's going to be tremendous. Depth is weak, though. You have a redshirt freshman, Ben Finesif. and then another freshman, T.J. Branch, a 3-star from Miami. I think this is a solid secondary. There's definitely major concerns who's going to step in and be that corner outside of McKinney, who will get on field in rotation at safety. Can Hodge return the form in the slot? Really not all that high in the secondary. McKinney is going to be great, though, Nick, and that's certainly great in going in the right direction. But I just don't expect them to be all that good, and I think they're going to regress a good bit. But the good news is they do have that pass rush that's going to make things a little bit easier for them.
McKinney will certainly be the standout, maybe a potential All-American. I think he can have a really good season. 62 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 picks, which one of them he took to the house, 9 pass breakups. He'll be really good for this team again this year. He'll certainly carry the bulk of the load here. Outside of him, I agree with you. I'm a little soft on this secondary. Stoudemire is solid. 43 total tackles, tackle for loss, 7 pass breakups for him. Preston Hodge, 33 total tackles, a tackle for loss, 2 picks, 7 pass breakups for him as well. He's a solid player, but he's been better in previous stops, so I want to see what he looks like. I think adding Byard from South Florida was a great add. 54 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick for him. He's a very versatile player that plays well in the slot. A solid run defender with good tackling IQ. Overall, though, R.J. Johnson will probably start at left cornerback. I wasn't super impressed with him in his limited reps. This is a guy I think could be potentially a guy you want to look at this year. He comes over from Arkansas as his previous stops. Curious to see how the secondary progresses. I think DJ McKinney will be really good, but who's going to be his partner, and can they step up and be strong for this team? I think that's something you have to keep an eye on. Ivan Yates could potentially be involved in getting that position as well. So a lot of question marks there. Curious to see what that looks like, but McKinney's a star player. Excited to watch him.
I look at the defensive verdict. The Buffaloes were pretty polished on this side of the ball last year as it went from being a major liability to being very competitive. They were largely very sound versus the run, played very well when defending the pass as well. The Kansas game, of course, was tough for them late in the year and shows the issues they still have, but, they showed what they're capable of for the most part last year. They held numerous good offenses in check, went on the road to Texas Tech. They weren't really able to do much. UCF, they were on a tear before they went to Orlando and held them in check as well. That was a big blowout victory for them. So there was opportunities for this defense to showcase improvements, and they did. I think they'll have a good pass rush once again. They're going to be suitable against the run, but its secondary might be in some peril due to some underlying question marks we just discussed with this roster. I think they're going to take a step back across the board, though, altogether, Nick, but I don't think they're going to be awful. But you might see performances like what they had against Kansas last year, maybe a little bit more often.
This is a solid defense overall still. It was a really good unit last year, right? They had a bunch of stats in the top 50. They were solid. 23.1 points per game is good. They will take a step back. I like what they have on the defensive line. I think they really addressed those needs with Lightfoot and Otis, and they were really strong in that regard. Hughes was a really good add as well. The secondary, I think, is a weaker unit. I'm definitely concerned about that secondary, keeping an eye on that. The linebacking core, I like the 2 adds they made, and guys I think they can really trust and be solid for this team. This defense, I think, will still be pretty solid. It's not going to be as good as it was last year. There will be some regression, but overall, I still think it's going to be a strong unit. It will be nothing like the first year season in Boulder for Dion. This defense will be a middle-of-the-road unit, though, that I think will be quite solid in this conference.
Now I move to the Colorado schedule and the prediction. The Buffaloes are going to shift from the glitz and the glamour team to trying to manufacture results as a collective team compared to being carried by elite talents the last 2 years. Offense might be significantly worse, but as upside, well, I think the defense will either slightly regress or be around the same. This team isn't screaming it'll be very good, but I think if the offense finds a normal groove compared to just go routes on every play, and then the defense will probably do its part to win games as well, then they can be pretty good. Problem is the schedule is very difficult. I just don't have a very good feeling about this team's ability to perform this year, Nick. I think there's too many question marks. The offensive line will be better, but how much better? Will they really be able to go from 65 rushing yards a game to a healthy 150? I don't think so. The secondary is definitely going to take a step back because you lose the best player in America, who was Defensive Player of the Year, and of course won the Heisman. So this team, Nick, I don't think they're built to lose 2 elite talents. I know people might be upset with us calling the glitz and the glamour team. That's quite frankly what they were. No one's talking about Colorado this offseason. No one seems to care, Nick. The hype has kind of died out. Dion has to do something to be able to get that back because I think those 2 years in college football were incredibly exciting. But that's the truth of it right now, Nick. 7 months into the offseason, no one has said a word about this team, and I can see why. I think they can be really good, but I'm just going to go middle of the pack, 5-7.
During the first 2 years in Boulder, Colorado, it was really the Hollywood of the Colorado. It wasn't Boulder, Colorado. It was Hollywood, California. It was a full-time production, and Dion was the star of it. It was a great show, but he also had 2 strong co-stars, including the Heisman Trophy winner and a great quarterback that happened to be his son. You take those 2 out of the equation there, and it's like the big 3 with LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh. But you remove LeBron, you move Bosh, and you just leave Dwayne Wade, who was a great player for the Heat still in his later years, but it wasn't the same deal. You're removing two key parts of the puzzle here, and I think there's going to be regression. Dion's a great coach. I will certainly never say he's a bad coach. I think he's a great coach that has done a lot, but he has not done enough in the high school recruiting. They're not bringing enough guys in the high school classes. Yes, they're bringing in a flashy five-star here and there with Seton and Lewis, and both those players will probably have great impact. Seton already is. Lewis will probably do so in the future as well. But I just think the whole team is not fully together here. They can't run the ball. 65 yards per game is putrid. You said a healthy 150. I don't think they're anywhere near that. I think if they get to 90 yards per game, that's a stark improvement and a really good start. The offensive line was abysmal last year. They brought in a bunch of different transfers. They got to find a way to play together. I like what they have on the defensive side of the ball. Outside of the secondary, I do think DJ McKinney is a great player. That D-line is solid. New look wide receiving room, a new quarterback in Keaton Salter, who's got to play. He's played bad last year, but he played great 2 years ago. Which Keaton Salter are you going to get? I've said that a few times this episode. That's a big question mark if you're a Colorado fan. All of the big attention may not be on them anymore, so maybe it's a more low-key season here. Opens on a Thursday against Georgia Tech, or Friday, either Thursday or Friday against Georgia Tech. Opens on a weeknight. That's a key game early on. You and I both have them losing that one. The Yellow Jackets are a very strong team. The schedule outside of that has some tough trips, has some tough opponents on there. Can this team get to a bowl game? I think it's certainly possible. It's certainly realistic. There's a pathway to it. I just don't know if it's going to happen right now. There's not a lot of buzz with this team. You're right. It's very quiet. It feels like the energy's been sucked out of them. If Dion can get this team to 6-7 wins, and that's really positive for him. But if they have a 4-8, 5-7 season, it could be really deflating to this project and put the whole thing in question, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I've said it before, maybe this is the wrong opportunity to say this, but I'm going to reiterate it, Nick. I think Deion Sanders is going to be the next head coach at Florida State. This guy's proven what he can do on the high school ranks. They just don't have enough resources here at Colorado to continuously do that. And the portal momentum will die out at some time. You can't just pull in top 10 classes year after year. You see Ole Miss do it, right? And look at the results. They're just not there. So it's going to be challenging for Colorado to even sniff those type of rankings year after year. This portal class, it's respectable and it's good, but it's getting a lot weaker than it was in the first 2 years, Nick. And, Lincoln Riley over at USC, he even admitted, he's like, yeah, we can't do this portal thing every year. Put a lot of emphasis on the high school recruiting, and that's went very well for him so far. So I think that's the biggest problem. I don't know how invested Deion will be long term. I think he'll be at Florida State here shortly. But I'd like to see what this team can do. We're not being disrespectful at all. I know we've been accused of that in the past, Nick, but I think this team can be very good. But I just think there's underlying problems because we have not built a whole lot through the high school ranks, and that's going to expose a lot of weaknesses.
Certainly no disrespect. I think this will be a fun team to watch still. If they can fire on all cylinders on offense and find some balance, they'll be a fun team to watch. I think there's some key players here, but I just don't think they've done the right things in the high school ranks. I don't think they've built the team the proper way. I agree with you. It's not sustainable to keep recruiting out of the portal. You see the issues at Ole Miss. You've seen it at other schools as well. Yes, it's good to go to the portal and add pieces that supplement your team, but you can't build your team in the portal. You got to get those guys through the high school ranks. Colorado has a very weak high school class for 2026. I know it's early in the cycle, but Alabama, USC, Georgia, these are schools that are loading up on 2026 talent, and Colorado's kind of getting left behind. A lot of guys are not even looking towards the Buffaloes. We're curious to see what happens with Deion. What happens after a 4-8 season? Does he bolt? Does he make a move? I guess a lot of that kind of weighs on what happens at Florida State. I don't know if they're going to can Mike Norvell after another bad season potentially, but we'll keep an eye on that. Obviously, curious to see how this all kind of goes. There's still a lot of intrigue with Colorado, right? You're still a team there. You're going to want to check and see what they're doing. It's just not exactly the flash and glitz and glam that it was in the past. A solid team, 5-7 for me, but I'm curious to see what they can do. They can certainly get 6 wins. They can certainly find themselves in a bowl game if some things go their way.
That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.